And I can't stress enough the importance of blockchain tech in really bringing to market a whole new generation of collectors. And so when we started Verisart back in 2015, we were kind of made aware, I guess, of like the fact that blockchains could be used for other things other than virtual currencies, because at the time it was really the story primarily of Bitcoin. And when we started Verisart in 2015, there wasn't really any other sort of permissionless ledger technology at scale to use other than Bitcoin. Ethereum wasn't publicly available. There'd been a crowd sale, but there wasn't actually a functioning kind of network at that point. And so I was also somewhat scarred by my experience at Sedition, where we had been unable to really show that there was a consumer appetite for digital art at that point in time. And so I focused the attention of the business really on the physical art market. Because back in 2015, and some of you may have seen the kind of recent Netflix documentary about the oldest gallery in New York, the Nodler.
Oh, Robert, we've lost you.
Did I lose you there for a second? Apologies. Can you hear me again?
Yes, Carrot, we just lost you when you were talking about the documentary about the gallery.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just saying, but back in 2015, it was the time of the sort of the scandal of the Nodler Gallery in New York, which was discovered to be selling fake Rothkos or fake paintings by the deceased artist Mark Rothko by the dozen to people like the chairman of Sotheby's, Domenico De Soli at the time. So the issue of unauthorized reproductions, the issue of kind of fraud with regards to of attribution was one that was a real, and still is, a real problem in the physical art market. And so we focused initially on utilizing blockchain tech to create better certification standards for people in the physical art market, because we didn't think at that time that the lack of certification standards in the digital art market was what was holding it back. Kind of what was holding it back was that there wasn't really a generation of people that wanted to really buy digital art at that moment. Now, of course, what we've seen is that as people became more comfortable with owning digital currency, and as there are additional kind of use cases for blockchain tech, that it was a sort of perfect storm last year in terms of this extraordinary interest and creative explosion in the NFT landscape. But let's just kind of to focus a little, just to sort of wrap up this kind of why we started Verisart. I think what we're seeing now is that issues of creative attribution are still very prominent in the NFT space, and there've been more and more articles out lately in terms of the problems that large marketplaces, open marketplaces like OpenSea are facing with regards to the number of listings that they have to take down under DMCA guidelines, increasing reports around like fraudulent actors that are posing as real life artists when they're not those real life artists. So the issue of trust hasn't kind of completely gone away, and like our view is that transaction authenticity, or what the blockchain kind of says as a true or false transaction ID, is a long way from creative authenticity. And so really, actually, our mission at Verisart has now evolved, and I'm grateful for it, that we now support not just physical artwork certification using blockchain tech, but obviously we do these certified NFTs where the NFT minting also has this artist record. And the importance of this artist record is that many of the marketplaces will freeze the metadata when the work is kind of minted. And our view is that, the artist certificate is this sort of extensible kind of sidecar that can kind of have changeable metadata that allows the artist to really control the narrative of the story over time, and also to connect with collectors outside of the marketplace through their own collector awards. And that's really what we build and support at Verisart.
That's brilliant précis of where you come from and where you're heading towards. What you're talking about, Robert, suggests though that if having this metadata verify authenticity could be applied to anything, not just art. Do you see that becoming a platform that, with wider applications?
Yeah, so we actually moved out of having like a data standards, which were initially just designed to certify art objects. So we used something called it was a kind of like a CRM system for which museums use, called CDOC CRM, which was meant that when we first started Verisart, the data structure was tied to artwork objects, and they were kind of referenced within kind of a museum understanding of, you know, materials and dimensions and time. And we still to this date will use certain artist name directories like Getty's ULAN, Uniform Artist Name Directory. So that was very much a very tight sort of set of data standards. But actually for the last 2 years now, we've kind of loosened that up. And we do already have, for our Shopify app, many merchants that are using certification for non-artwork products. So we have people who are certifying, you know, bottles of champagne that are kind of limited edition, that have a kind of creative component to it. We're really used by creators as opposed to creators that just have to be artists. So the majority of the people that use Verisart are not certifying works that have happened, you know, hundreds of years ago, because there's kind of like issues there around, well, who is the authorized entity to kind of say this is real. But it's really where we have this combination of verified identity, where the issuer has kind of verified themselves through a, you know, some type of government ID, third-party verification provider like on FIDO, or in our case, we use a company called Vouched. And then we tie that to cryptographic attestations, keys that are associated to those verified IDs. And then it kind of becomes more complex because you can have, you know, multiple keys used for different purposes at different times. But ultimately, we're really about helping creators, whatever their creations are. So not just artworks, but any form of product that's being created, like by a living entity.
Does this mean that we'll see, say digital creators in influencers? It suggests to me that it's the sort of thing that we'll start seeing appear on TikTok, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I saw the other day, I can't remember what it was, but I saw a whole NFT social network, which was really designed for rethinking what a social network might look like, and every single post was actually a tradable NFT. I think you're going to see a lot of innovation, particularly, you know, with what's happening in the States now, where you've got, you know, this kind of intersection of talent agencies, new IP like Bored Apes, Yacht Club, or, you know, World Women Wow, and this sort of like representation of this new IP at the kind of like highest level in LA is going to, I think, help push forward the more mainstream adoption of NFTs. You know, I still think we're kind of not halfway up the bell curve in terms of where we are in terms of mainstream adoption at this point.
Part of that adoption is also affected by the interface, and as I think probably most people agree that buying NFTs is still a pretty clumsy business. What sort of things are you seeing on how that you know, more consumer adoption is going to be improved with, you know, just better interfaces, better user design? Is that coming soon, do you think?
I mean, I think it's, yeah, I mean, definitely it's coming soon. The question is, you know, would it look like anything that we've currently seen to date? And that's the real question. Because, I mean, you know, even the most popular web-based kind of wallet, MetaMask, only has 35 million accounts. And most of those kind of grew in the last year, largely driven by Axie Infinity. And then when you look at like NFT linked wallets, you know, the sort of numbers kind of are a tenth of that. And so when you kind of contrast this sort of level of activity, which is still significant, but against sort of the, you know, the numbers that you see, you know, by the big internet companies, or the big e-commerce businesses, Amazon, Shopify, you know, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google. These are almost like rounding errors, you know, in terms of sort of the monthly active uniques. And so, you know, what we're part of Shopify's, I guess, approved, you know, partner apps for integrating NFT minting solutions to Shopify merchants. And I can tell you that, you know, they announced this, so it's not sort of private information. You can go to see shopify.com/NFT. But, you know, I would expect the wallet to be very pervasive in kind of like our Web3 experience. In fact, Mike, I saw a really good graph that sort of was just Web 1.0, and it was a sort of input box for name and password, and then Web 2.0, and it just had your sort of social logins like Facebook and Google and others, and then Web 3.0, and it showed a kind of MetaMask wallet or, you know, other form of crypto wallet. But I think the idea that your wallet will be native to you, that you have complete control over it, and it can move around the metaverse, digital web as we know it, and new forms of going online that haven't yet really come about, is I think the way that things are going. And so, yeah, I definitely think that there'll be a huge part to play in the existing businesses in terms of aiding that portability of, you know, value across the web.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, you know, in Web3, your crypto wallet becomes the way that you log in or interact with services. You have a lot more control. Obviously, a few years ago, we started talking about the concepts around self-sovereign identity, but it didn't really translate nearly to the same extent as the concept of NFTs, which I think probably we'll be sticking with that term for a good long while. We still use the term URL, for instance, so I wouldn't be surprised if we'll still be talking about NFTs in a few years' time. One of the fascinating aspects of this whole new world is how NFTs are not just art, but attached potentially to artworks or assets which are you know, created by creators. It's also a gateway into a sort of a club, I suppose. You know, the Bored Apes Yacht Club, for instance. If you own one of those, you become a member of a club. There are other similar examples. What are some of your thoughts, Robert, on that phenomenon of the exclusivity that some NFT cultures have? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's exclusionary, or do you think it's just part of the way things kind of shake out?
I mean, I think it's all we've been here before. I mean, I wrote in actually the Wired magazine 2022 prediction issue. They asked me to write about NFTs in the art market, and when I was thinking about these PFP drops that have become so valuable and the things that, you know, have caught the attention alongside, you know, the blockbuster sale by Beeples and Pack and a few of these other artists, but things like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes has really you know, caught people's imagination because they are in some ways the most reductive as an artwork form. They're just a single image, you know, created as a series of outputs from a computer. So there isn't actually even a human authorship in the outputs in many cases. There may be human authorship in the overall design. But when I was thinking about them and not really getting obsessed about the value, because the value changes so much, and when I was writing this article, it was sort of 5 months ahead of publication date, so I couldn't really just focus on what the auction figures were. But it really made me think about AOL, you know, and I was at AOL in 95, 96, and back then no one would tell you their real name in an AOL chat room. That was kind of like sacrosanct. So people did adopt names, and, you know, there were werewolf chat rooms, and there were kind of I don't know, hamster chat rooms, and people sort of anthropomorphized themselves, and they gave themselves, like, their screen name was, you know, instead of Mike Butcher at AOL.com, it would have been, Werewolf 7539 or something. And people who had these screen names would join the Werewolf chat room. And so people would sort of identify them as, people who had skin in the game because that was their actual screen name. And it's not that, they didn't have the value that we've seen with Bored Apes, but if you strip away the value, there's still this type of like digital tribalism that I think, is very baked into the idea of the internet, full stop. We as humans, I think, kind of oscillate between wanting anonymity, wanting to live in big cities, wanting to go out, not anyone know who we are, going to clubbing and meeting new people again in a kind of anonymous context. But at the same time, because of the social web and how incredibly successful that's been, we've sort of, things like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and others has kind of made that we enforce transparency in terms of our internet experience. And I think that what we're seeing, with regards to Web3 is a little bit of a reversion to increased anonymity again, at least in terms of the way that, people see you. And the irony is that you've got full transparency of the transaction layer, but you have kind of anonymity in terms of not needing to, interact with kind of Web3 in the sort of way that you would a Web 2.0. So I don't know if it's necessary. It's exclusionary, I guess, once it gets to a certain kind of price point. Certainly a lot of people would feel priced out of buying a CryptoPunk or a Bored Ape, but I think it's a broader story that I think we'll continue to see play out in the metaverse, which is this sort of ways that people come together that are not necessarily easily afforded in kind of physical structures like, sport and the course will be there as well. But there'll always be, I think, an interest for particularly new generations of people to find new ways to define themselves.
That's absolutely correct. And of course, some of these things aren't just about value. They're also about, bringing people together around subjects that people are passionate about, so that in this sort of classic club approach, I guess. What are some of the other sort of trends that you think are things that people should be aware of, whether it be either in the art market or perhaps on the technology side of things? Obviously, venture capitalists have taken a huge interest in this market and are building out and funding new kinds of platforms, new competitors to places like OpenSea, for instance, or blockchains like Solana now trying to go for the NFT market over Ethereum. What are the other kinds of interesting themes that you think are being thrown up at the moment in this space?
I think the way that people use NFTs today is very primitive. The idea that you're buying an asset and everybody else can see the same asset that you have, and yet you hope that in the future you're going to be able to sell that asset for more than you paid for it, even though everybody else couldn't experience that asset for free today. I think that is a shaky assumption upon which to build long-term value. But the idea that these NFTs are going to be used for many different things, you talked about memberships, there's content gating, there's kind of like airdrops, it might be time-based, there's provenance, certificate of authenticity, which is kind of where we've kind of been focusing our attention. I think that, they'll get a lot more complex. So an NFT won't be a be-all and end-all to itself. It might just be a gateway to a series of more complex NFTs that call that NFT and allow you to kind of really engage further in a content experience or in a community participation. So, they'll be rooted ultimately into the C's, right? Content, community, context, and commerce. But I think that there will just be a new way to sort of underpin those types of experiences. I think there's some interesting things to look at. I think, Secret Network, which is Guy Ziskin's thing, he formerly wrote the Enigma Protocol white paper, but that sort of is what Quentin Tarantino used in his NFTs for, certain iconic scenes from Pulp Fiction. And the idea that you will have lockable files that are actually, private on chain, as opposed to being private, like a collector awards, which is kind of largely off chain and sort of currently done by, the marketplaces themselves. I think that concept of, the owner having a significantly different and more unique experience than the viewer is going to be continually explored and looked at, because I honestly think that it's I think without that it's challenging that you can always assume you're going to find someone that wants to pay more than what you did when they can enjoy it for free, and so I think that that's one thing to look at is, how is the owner experience significantly improved. I mean, Secret Network is just one way to look at it, but I said that we talked about some of the other facts that it could trigger other NFTs. It could sort of take you further into the sense of a collector's club from that creator. I mean, I think that, that you talk about Solana, but I think that I wouldn't, there's one of the biggest raises recently has been, trust machines, which is, Ali's attempt again to rethink about the Bitcoin blockchain, for being used for non-fungible tokens. And, we had always hoped that Bitcoin would be able to be used for more than it really has. It's interesting to see that, people are still trying again with fresh capital and fresh ideas to do that. So how these chains, interact is going to be the one, I think, one of the big challenges in terms of the bridges between chains, because they're still rather difficult from a user point of view. They make buying an NFT seem like a walk in the park if you try and bridge between chains. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, perhaps maybe Polkadot might be part of Polkadot, or Cosmos might be part of those solutions going forward. Finally, Robert, what are some of the things we can expect from Verisart in the future? And just before you jump into that, I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to jump on stage and ask a question. For those of you in the audience and you're able to jump on stage, if you would like to come up and just ask a question right in the closing minutes of this session. But yeah, Robert, what are kinds of things that we can expect? Obviously, you don't want to reveal all your new upcoming news, but
we're continuing to support like great artist drops. We just did 22 artists with Artsy last month. So many of them were their inaugural NFTs. We just are doing the first edition set by William Wegman on OpenSea later this month, famous for his Weimaranas and dressing them up. And we've integrated NFT minting within our new pricing plans on Verisart, and we're really excited about rolling out support for Shopify merchants, because we think that's going to be the easiest way for mainstream people to buy NFTs. They'll be able to buy them just within any Shopify storefront, either paying money in dollars or any kind of fiat currency or in cryptocurrency. We think that's going to be a hugely popular kind of next step. I mean, our view is that, if you again look at the parallels here between kind of what we saw in 1999, 2000, there's definitely froth in the NFT market. There was a time when people wrote e-commerce off, right? And e-commerce was just getting started. I think there's a little bit of that correction happening now in the NFT space. But fundamentally, I would expect, the transactions to take place a lot closer to where the creators are. And so, of course, to date, you've seen a huge amount of value amalgamated at the marketplace level. OpenSea, recently kind of valued at 13 billion or so. And it's very reminiscent of how eBay took most of the value in the e-commerce space for many, many years. But over time, Shopify turned out to be 4 times as big as eBay, because it's about enabling, millions and millions and millions of merchants to feel for their collectors or their buyers to sort of trust buying through those merchant sites. And at the moment, we don't trust buying on the whole through NFT sellers' sites directly. We want to buy through NFT marketplaces. But I think as we feel more comfortable with and can trust that the NFTs that we're buying are real, I would expect those transactions to, take place at a micro level more than just at a macro level.
Great. Well, I just want to say, Robert Norton from Verisart, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad to catch up with you and hopefully see you in real life soon.
That would be
just
great.
want to say thanks very much for coming to this session at the NFT Festival. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. I also want to thank Mike Butcher for your incredible moderation and for the interview. So on behalf of all our members and Connect.Club, thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks very much. Well, over to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival, everyone.
Absolutely. Robert, if you're still with us, I'm actually quite interested in the work that you've done with Super Rare, because I understand that Verisart is a blockchain certification platform, and I think in partnership with the marketplaces, you could deploy various mechanisms for licensing, authentications, etc. So it would be great to talk to you about it. And he's gone.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was meant to leave the stage. I just followed Mike, so I didn't know if you wanted me up here. Sorry, I missed that because I got someone else was talking to me about when I got off the stage. It was about what we did with Super Rare. Was that the question, or
That's
about
right?
blockchain?
Yes. Well, we have some of the members of our community are actually the founders of marketplaces. And
Sure.
I'm keen to learn a bit more what you did with Verisart, with Super Rare, I think earlier this year, especially
sure.
when it came to sort of opening the doors for more contemporary artists, the established guys, and the deployment of mechanisms for authentication, licensing. I think it's provenance as well. I think that worked really well from what I understood.
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about that. So I kind of touched upon it a little bit when I was telling you about my experience writing Sedition art between 2010 and 2013. And so I was kind of on a panel with Devin Finzer from OpenSea at the end of 2020. It was during LA Blockchain Summit. And so I read his NFT Bible, which he published earlier that year. And I kind of thought, oh, okay, this is really interesting. Maybe the market's moved on. Of course, it had moved on, but I wasn't, we were focused really on physical certification at that point. But we wrote an article, a blog post. We now have a blog on Verisart called The Ledger, but we published this blog post towards the end of 2020 saying that NFT is the future of the art market. And I got someone in my team just to say, hey, look, go speak to some of the NFT artists like Trevor Jones and some of the principals at the marketplaces and some of the well-known collectors like Corbin Bell and Museum of Crypto Art, and just kind of help sort of put some color on this, because at the time it was not really more than $100 million business, so it was still quite sort of early stages, and then by doing that article, we kind of just got to sort of real sense that that this market is really, quite meaningful. And so I sort of reached out to John Crane at Super Rare because I felt that at the time, Super Rare was probably what Sedition art would have become if I'd kind of stayed there. It was very art focused. It was very kind of creator friendly. It was kind of felt upscale. It was kind of, it was about the art. It wasn't about, PFPs, for example, which are great, but it just wasn't sort of the world that I was as familiar with. And so I reached out to John Crane and said, hey, look, I think a lot of artists are interested. I have quite a lot of good relationships with artists because we'd previously done their first digital editions that they sold online. So it wasn't a huge step for them to kind of go trust us to, manage their first NFT.
Robert, just for the sake of timekeeping, because we've got another session just about to start, but I hope you don't mind if I reach out to you and we can continue this conversation, because I think there is a lot of synergy in terms of what you have done and what we're trying to create
Yeah,
within
sure.
our
But I mean,
community.
just to finish up, and if anyone wants to see it,
Sure.
we did these 2 auctions on Super Rare, which were curated 10 by 10, which happened sort of in March, April, and then we followed up with 8 by 8 in May, and took many well-known artists from Petra Courtwright to Shepard Fairey.
That's actually exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, and congratulations on your new series, 2222, right? It's
with Artsy. Thank
with
you.
Artsy, yeah.
Yeah, happy to chat, and you can ping me in our Discord at Verisart, or you can just reach me, robert@verisart.com. Okay.
Perfect. We'll do
Cool.
that. Well,
Thanks
listen,
again.
thank you for your input. You can sit down in the audience. I shall invite the next session.